I followed my mother's 6 rules perfectly, my whole life, to survive the monster hunting girls in our town. But as I sat locked in a pitch-black car with our friendly, respected neighbor, feeling his heavy hand grab my thigh, I realized the rules were a lie, and when his hot, stale breath hit my neck, I didn't scream. I smiled. Then I dug my nails deep into his eyes, ripped his skin, and tore his free will straight out of his skull. The real monster wasn't a phantom, it was me. What is up, guys? Welcome back. And just to clarify real quick, this is not an AI voice. This is my actual voice, a real human being sitting here reading these to you. Tonight we have 5 stories from r/no sleep, Minecraft running in the background, and absolutely nowhere else I need to be. Enjoy the video. Story 1. My mother gave me 6 rules to survive. I followed them perfectly, and I almost died. My mother handed me the list when I turned 12. All mothers did that in our community. For us, it was more of a survival briefing, not a regular mother-daughter talk on puberty. The rules were what kept us safe. In our neighborhood on the outskirts of Delhi, we, the girls, grew up under a shadow. It was needed, as everyone knew it was the only way to be spared by the entity. It did not have a name, but it had a presence. A suffocating, malevolent force that snatched girls from alleys, pulled them out of the dark, and left their broken bodies in ditches. The neighborhood elders spoke of it in hushed, terrified tones. Nobody had seen it. The ones who did ended up in the aforementioned ditches. We always wondered why it did not come for the men. It feeds on vulnerability, my mother told me, her hands gripping my shoulders so hard it almost left bruises. If you follow the rules perfectly, you create a ward. Good, obedient girls are spiritually shielded. The ones it takes, they forgot a rule. They broke the ward. Her eyes were wide with fear. I believed her. I had to. These were the rules I lived by. Rule 1. The ward of silence. Never look straight ahead on the street. Keep your eyes glued to your feet. If you hear whispers or calls in the dark, you become a shadow. You do not flinch, you do not speed up, and you never, ever reply. No reaction means safety. Rule 2. The cloak. Your outfit must be 3 sizes too big, drowning your shape. No loud colors. Your scarf must be pinned securely across both shoulders, double layered, hiding your collarbones. No visible arms or legs. The entity is attracted to exposed skin. Rule 3. The curfew. Be indoors before the street lights flicker on. If you are late, the dark belongs to it, and you are in its domain. Rule 4. The domestic shield. When male guests or your father's friends visit, practice invisibility. Serve the chai perfectly, keep your head down, smile politely if spoken to, and vanish into the kitchen. You never know who the entity has latched onto. Rule 5. The locked door. Never be alone in a room with a man, even if he shares your blood. The entity can possess the weak-willed to get to you. Rule 6. The ultimate compliance. If the force ever corners you, do not scream or fight. High frequencies and aggression feed its malice. Be docile, beg softly, appeal to its cosmic order, call them brother or uncle, remind them of God, remind them you are a daughter of the soil. When the girl 3 houses down from us disappeared on her way back from college, the aunties whispered that she wore Western clothes and listened to loud music. She broke rule 2, my brain rationalized, cold and clinical. She broke the ward and let the evil in. I felt a sickening sense of safety. I wore suffocating layers of fabric in 40-degree heat. I kept my eyes glued to the asphalt. I made the perfect chai. I was invisible. Thus, I was safe from the monster. Then came the monsoon of my final year of college. The rain was a deafening sheet of grey. The streets flooded within minutes, stranding the buses. I panicked. It was 5:30 p.m. The sky was bruising into a dark, violent purple, the streetlights flickering weakly against the storm. Rule 3. The entity's hour was coming. I waded through knee-deep water, my heavy, soaked shirt clinging to my skin. I felt naked, exposed, breaking Rule 2 by no fault of my own. I could feel something, tracking my desperate movements through the downpour. Just then, a white SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. It was Sharma Uncle. He lived 2 doors down from us. A genuinely kind man, a retired government officer who spent his pension funding a local library for girls. a man my father deeply respected. "Beta," he called out, his voice warm with fatherly concern. "The roads are entirely blocked. Come inside, sit in the back. I'll drop you home. It's not safe for a girl out here. The dark is setting in." I relaxed. I calculated the rules in my head. Rule 3, get inside. Rule 4, respect your elders. He was a safe man, a good man. I thanked the gods for sending him to me. I got into the back seat. "Thank you, uncle," I whispered, keeping my eyes on my lap. Rule 1, Rule 6. He smiled in the rearview mirror. Good girl. The drive was silent, save for the thrumming of the rain. I looked out of the windows a bit too late. We turned into the basement parking lot of an under-construction commercial building he owned. The automated garage door rolled down behind us, sealing out the sound of the storm, sealing us into a pitch-black concrete tomb. "Uncle, where are we?" My voice trembled. "My mother is waiting," he did not answer. He cut the engine. The dashboard lights died. I heard the click of his seatbelt. I heard him move. Rule 5, never be alone in a room with a man. He opened the back door and climbed in next to me. The smell of cheap cologne, wet leather, and stale tobacco filled the cramped space. His hand was grazing my thigh. He grabbed my wrist with a terrifying, brutal strength. "Uncle," I whimpered, shrinking against the door. Look down. Do not look the demon in the eye. Rule 1. He pinned me to the wet leather seat, his hands tearing at the heavy fabric I had relied on for protection. I felt the first tear of my kurti. I felt his hot, heavy breath on my neck, and for a split second I froze, waiting for the sky to fall, waiting for the universe to strike him down. But the darkness remained indifferent, the silence remained absolute. A profound, white-hot fury sparked to life beneath my ribs. It was not fear, it was a violent, liberating rage. There was no entity. It was easier to believe in the existence of a monster than the evil that hides in such men. The rules were a lie, and if the rules were a lie, then compliance was suicide. Rule 1, never look them in the eye. I snapped my head up. I drove my gaze straight into his. He flinched, shocked by the sudden defiance of his good girl. Rule 6, do not scream, do not fight, it angers them. I roared, a raw, primal sound that tore from the depths of my throat, shattering the silence of the concrete basement. I did not beg, I did not call him uncle, I fought back. I dug my fingernails deep into his face, ripping skin, gouging toward his eyes. He shrieked, backing away, clutching his bleeding cheek in disbelief. He slapped me hard and held my neck in a tight chokehold. He was old, but strong for his age. As my blood boiled with defiance and I thrashed about kicking him with whatever strength I had left, something else answered the call. The air in the car began to vibrate, and the temperature dropped visibly. Our breath bloomed into white plumes. The rain outside seemed to halt, suspended in midair. From the shadows of the backseat floorboard, the darkness began to thicken, rising like black smoke. Unlike what we had been taught, there was never any phantom demon coming to claim us. The real entity was not born of the dark. It was born of us. It was the suppressed, choked-back rage of the many girls who had been violated and died in rooms just like this, waiting for a savior that never came. It had been fed by centuries of silent compliance, and now it was awakened by my rebellion. The formless shadow drifted behind Sharma Uncle, its cold tendrils wrapping around his arms, pinning him in place. He thrashed, his eyes widening in actual supernatural terror as the darkness locked his limbs. A chorus of whispers echoed through the car. We played by the rules, the voices hissed. It was never a level playing field. The entity looked at me. It was offering a pact. I was no longer the prey. "Give us a voice," the cold whispered in my head, "and we will give you the teeth." I understood. I accepted. I opened my mouth and drew the freezing black smoke deep into my lungs. I absorbed it. The transition was agonizing and beautiful. I felt the final terror of every missing girl slide into my veins. The girl from 3 houses down. The girl from the park. The ones whose names were never spoken. I took all of their accumulated fear, condensed it into a single freezing point of absolute malice, and forced it down Sharma Uncle's throat. I looked at him, whimpering, pinned against the door by the sheer gravity of my presence. This was the man who organized the neighborhood festivals, the man everyone respected, a pathetic, cowardly monster when stripped of his societal armor. "Please," he whimpered, his hands trembling. "I'm your uncle." "You are nothing," I spat. My voice did not sound like just mine anymore. It was layered, heavy, and resonant. I did not kill him. Death would be too quick, an easy escape from the world we had to build. Instead, I reached into his mind with the cold tendrils of my new skin and tore out his free will. I hollowed him out until he was nothing but a compliant husk. The rules were his to follow now. I climbed into the front passenger seat, the freezing air subsided, and the heavy thrum of the monsoon rain slammed back onto the roof of the SUV. "Drive," I instructed. His movements were stiff, mechanical, completely devoid of the grandfatherly warmth he had faked for decades. I laughed as his trembling hands shifted the car into gear, his eyes wide and vacant, completely powerless under my gaze. "I have a lot of work ahead of me now. Let me know if you know of any Sharma uncles. It's time to teach them some new rules." It's that ending. Take a second with that one. Let us keep moving though, because this next story takes us somewhere completely different. A man goes into the woods looking for his missing best friend. He finds him, but the thing walking out of those trees is not who he went looking for. Story 2. My best friend vanished in a national forest. I found what was left of him. I was not delusional enough to think I could compete with trained search and rescue officers. If there was something left of Thomas that the dogs could not sniff out, some sign that the infrared helicopters could not spot, that dozens of park rangers and military volunteers somehow failed to see, I did not think I had any chance of finding it. But what I did believe was that they conducted their search logically, and that perhaps Thomas had not behaved logically when he got lost, if he even got lost at all, and no one else was going to go into the woods and try to find him based on something completely illogical. No one else but me, because he was my best friend. With each hour that passed on my journey into the middle of nowhere, with every mile I covered, I felt more and more sure I was on the right track, and I felt more and more certain that Thomas had not gotten lost in the woods. I believed that something had lured him away. Searchers had only had a few hours before a storm came through the area, but it was enough time to garner something very peculiar. Thomas had been heading exactly in a straight line. Thomas had told me he was hiking a short backpacking loop over the weekend, but the dogs that the rangers could scrounge up on short notice were certain he had left the trail the second it swung south. He had kept going, straight northwest, and just before the rain began, the dogs tracked him going into a small lake, but they circled to the other side and picked up his scent again, exactly northwest, as if he had swum through the lake in a perfectly straight line so as not to lose his heading. And it was this heading that I was now following. The rangers had searched in a circle, about 10 miles in every direction from where he vanished, because they assumed he was lost. I was assuming he was not. I was assuming he had gone somewhere, and wherever it was, I was going to go there too. When I reached the lake, I did not swim through it. Markers left by searchers ensured I would not lose my path, but past that, it was up to me to keep perfectly northwest. And over boulders, down steep hills, and through creeks and shallow branching rivers, I kept to my path. As I saw broken sticks, freshly turned leaves, and even the occasional footprint, I felt increasingly hopeful that Thomas was still alive. As I got deeper into the woods, the hills grew taller, and the land felt older. Plants that had been spared the glaciers thousands of years ago were also spared the axe when humans came through. The honeysuckle of the plains was replaced with waxy-leaved rhododendrons. Ferns and moss took the place of the lowland grasses. The shaded streams were all lined with bamboo. Down here there were rattlesnakes and bears, beasts long ago driven out of the farmland, and even older reminders of the past stuck around. The honey locust trees with their giant thorns stood at the ready to protect them from mammoths and ground sloths that had not troubled them for millennia. I loved the woods dearly enough to know it was not a safe place, that danger could be lurking under every rock, around every bend. That was part of what made it so special. As I sweated and slogged through the brush, I found myself enjoying parts of the hike. The sun-dappled leaves, the birds so much more plentiful than in the young woods back home, would lull me into almost a trance. Then I would snap out of it and remember Thomas's life was at stake. But the further into the woods I went, the more the almost perceptible boot prints vanished, and the more I found myself trying to divine meaning from dents and slips in the mud that could have been nothing more than natural imperfections of the ground. As the sun started to grow low, I kept watch for clearings and flat spots. But the woods were thick and unforgiving, and eventually I settled for an old tree well, tying my tarp to the ripped up roots and staking the other end in the dirt. Normally I slept like a baby in the wilderness, but that night, jammed into the shallow tree well, with the roots and rocks digging into my back and dark thoughts digging into my mind, I hardly slept at all. As I mentally tossed and turned, I pondered what it would mean if I found Thomas, what state I might find him in, and of course, what exactly he might be looking for out here. Because this was not the first time Thomas had gotten lost in this forest. I had heard the story dozens of times over the years. It had happened just a bit before we met. It had been the middle of summer, a decade ago. Thomas and his family were camping at a park much further north. Different park, sure, but it was the same forest, and just as they were gearing up for a night of s'mores and scary stories around the fire, Thomas took off. His parents watched him wander slowly but purposefully into the trees. They figured he just did not want to make the trek to the camp bathroom, but as the minutes ticked by and he did not emerge from the dark woods, they knew something was wrong. They found Thomas by chance the next day. He had been spotted walking through a farm 6 miles away. The man who spotted him had to yell his name over and over again to get his attention. Thomas was so tired, so dehydrated, he was almost in a trance. Once he recovered, his parents started quizzing him on why he had left, and he said he had spotted a dog, and he was worried it was lost. But it kept running away from him, just out of reach, and by the time he gave up, he was completely lost. I had traced a line from the farm back to the campground Thomas's family had been staying in. If he had gone in a straight line, he could have been heading south and a bit to the west, toward the primeval center of the national forest. Woods that had been spared any logging, even hundreds of years ago. True old-growth forest. His heading when he vanished this time, straight northwest, also pointed toward those ancient woods. Something had tried to call Thomas away all those years ago and failed, but this time it had called him away again, and this time, perhaps it had succeeded. After my night in the tree well, I was sluggish. I checked my progress on the GPS and saw I had covered serious ground, enough to move slowly and still reach the center of the forest well before nightfall. By mid-morning, I was already noticing a change in the trees. They reached up higher and the trunks grew wider. I kept watch for some grand waterfall or a massive cave, anything at all to signal that something otherworldly was here. And as I failed to see any sign of something wondrous, I started to grow jealous. Jealous that Thomas had some mysterious, cosmic connection that I was lacking. That he was deemed worthy enough to meet a mysterious fate while I had been spurned. It was an irrational feeling, of course. For all I knew, something terrible had happened to him in these woods, but still. After hours of hiking through the ancient woods, I checked my GPS. I was right in what should be the center of the forest. I started to wonder if maybe I was being delusional, but then something in the distance caught my eye. A figure moving between the trees, stumbling, disorientated, moving through the ancient ferns with the careful, deliberate movements of someone navigating entirely by instinct. I called Thomas's name as loud as I dared, and the figure turned. It was him, emaciated to a shocking degree. His clothes hung from his frame in dirty, torn strips. His face was gaunt, cheekbones pressing sharply against skin that had gone pale and waxy. His hair had grown longer, and it hung in tangled clumps around his hollow face. His eyes were sunken deep into dark circles, but they were open, and when he turned at the sound of my voice, those eyes moved toward me. I closed the distance between us at a near run. He did not move toward me. He stood very still, watching me approach with that unsettling, patient stillness, like a deer that has not yet decided whether to bolt. "Thomas," I said. My voice was cracking badly. He watched me come. He did not smile. He did not speak. He tracked my approach with an expression that I could not immediately identify, something between recognition and wariness, the wariness of a wild thing being approached. I stopped a few feet away from him. I could see now how bad his condition actually was. He was deeply malnourished. His hands, hanging at his sides, were trembling slightly. The skin on them was wrong, too tight over the knuckles, a strange translucent quality to it. "Thomas," I said again, "it's me." He looked at me for a long time, then he looked down at his hands. He turned them over slowly, studying the backs of them in the filtered light of the old forest. Then he said, "You came." I got him water. I got him what food I had. I told him we were going to start moving immediately. The light was going to be gone in a few hours, and I was not going to spend another night in these woods. He moved with me without resistance, completely silent for a long time, following my lead through the brush. His movements were strange. He navigated the undergrowth with an ease that did not match his physical condition. The branches and thorns that snagged at my clothes and slowed my pace seemed not to bother him at all. The daylight banished my fear with amazing quickness, though. I had Thomas drink more water, eat just a little, and I did the same. The one thing I could not share was my coffee. I offered him a sip and said he probably should not have more than that. He accepted and spat it back out instantly. "What is that?" he asked, genuinely bewildered at the taste. And with that, I felt my heart sink. Just how much of the starvation damage would be permanent? We walked silently again, and he kept pace. When I started to lag, he forged ahead. And I stopped thinking those horrible thoughts about him being some kind of creature, and I started wondering what kind of future he might have when we got back. Then the daylight prompted him to finally break the silence. "It is so bright here," he said, his voice startling me. "And it is so quiet." He stopped walking. "Is it like this all the time?" "Thomas, what are you talking about?" He pointed up at the sky. "Is the sun always out like this?" And the way he looked at me, with genuine wonder, as if a sunny day was something completely new. "Thomas, what is my name?" His budding smile vanished. "I don't know." "You do not remember me at all? We are best friends." He did not answer. He just forged ahead through the undergrowth, as if the branches and thorns did not bother him in the slightest, as if walking through the brush was second nature. I told him to stop. We sat around the ashes of another campus fire. "Tell me what you do remember," I said. He responded, almost childlike, "I don't want to talk about where I'm from. I like it here so much better." "Tell me about the last time you were here then, what you remember before you got lost." He grabbed at a nearby rhododendron, running his fingers over the dark foliage. Then he said quietly, "My hands look so different in the light." I just nodded at him to continue. "I don't remember much. I wish I remembered you. I think you're nice." "That's okay. Just tell me what you do remember." I remember camping. My mum and my dad were with me, and we were going to make marshmallows and tell scary stories. I watched him as he talked, the way he curved his mouth when he spoke, the way he brushed his hair out of his face. It was all different. None of it matched the way he had talked before. All of his mannerisms had shifted entirely. "And I had to pee," he continued, "so I went into the woods real quick, but someone had lost their dog, and I couldn't leave him all scared and alone in the woods out there, so I followed him." He reached his hand up to his mouth and started chewing on his fingernails. A nervous habit he had never had before, at least not the Thomas I had known. But the dog wasn't a real dog, and he wasn't lost, and he took me to the bad place. He looked around, gazing up at the sun, and smiled. "I never thought I'd get back here. I thought I was going to get old and slow, and the monsters would get me, and that would be it." He looked back down at me. "Thank you for finding me." All I could do was nod and stand up. We booked it to the trail, back to the entrance. I was desperate to get this man home. Only when we got back to my car and closed the door did I let myself relax. And I put my hand on the bony arm of the stranger beside me and gave it a reassuring squeeze. He was not who I was looking for. But that was okay, because he was who Thomas had wanted me to find, so I would take care of him. The Thomas I had grown up with was not coming back. My best friend, whatever he was, had decided he could not stay here if it meant leaving a child to suffer in his place. My Thomas had gone back home, back to a place where the sun never rose and monsters prowled in the dark. That last line, "He went back so a child could go free." That is not a horror story. That is something else entirely. Let us shift gears now, because this next one starts at the back of a city bus at midnight. A driver who does the same route for 6 years, and then one rainy Thursday night, someone boards who should not be there. Story 3. For 6 years, I drove Route 47. The route was not special. It ran from the downtown transit centre through the industrial district, crossed the river, looped through several residential neighbourhoods, and ended at a shopping centre on the far side of town. It was the kind of route most drivers could practically do in their sleep. The first strange thing happened on a rainy Thursday in November. The weather had been awful all day, and by the time my shift was winding down, visibility had dropped to almost nothing. Around midnight, I was making my final loop before heading back to the depot. Only 3 passengers remained on the bus: a college kid wearing headphones, an older woman carrying several bags of groceries, and a man sitting all the way in the back. I did not remember seeing the man board. That was not necessarily unusual. Drivers miss things all the time when they are watching traffic, collecting fares, or dealing with passengers. What caught my attention was that he never moved. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, he sat in exactly the same position. His hands rested in his lap. His posture never changed. He was not looking out the window or scrolling through a phone. He simply stared straight ahead. The route continued normally until the older woman exited. A few stops later, the college kid stepped off as well. Suddenly, it was just me and the man in the back. I glanced in the mirror again. He was still there. A few minutes later, I reached the final stop. The shopping centre was closed for the night, and the parking lot was completely empty. I pulled into the turnaround area and opened the doors. "Last stop," I called. The man did not react. I repeated myself, louder. Still nothing. Finally, annoyed, I set the parking brake and walked down the aisle. When I reached the back of the bus, the seat was empty. I stopped and looked around. The man was gone. The bus had only one exit, and I would have seen anyone leave. Yet there was nobody there. I searched the entire vehicle, every seat, every corner, nothing. No passenger, no bag, no sign that anyone had been sitting there at all. The next day I mostly forgot about it. At least I tried to. The following week it happened again. Same route, same late night shift, same terrible weather. Just after midnight I checked the mirror and saw the man sitting in the exact same seat. He wore the same dark jacket, the same work boots. He sat with the same expressionless stare. This time I knew for certain he had not boarded. I had been paying attention at every stop, yet there he was. When I reached the end of the route and walked back to confront him, he vanished, exactly as before. By the third appearance, I started asking questions around the depot. Most of the drivers laughed it off. One older driver did not. The moment I described the man, he became visibly uncomfortable. After a long silence, he asked me a question. "Does he sit on the left side near the back?" When I nodded, the colour drained from his face. He got up and walked away without another word. A few days later, I cornered him in the break room and finally convinced him to explain. 20 years earlier, Route 47 had followed a slightly different path through the industrial district. One night, a driver named Carl was operating the last run when a drunk driver blew through a red light and slammed into the bus. Several passengers were killed instantly. One of the victims had been a factory worker heading home after a double shift. According to the accident report, his body had been found in the rear left section of the bus, the exact seat my mysterious passenger occupied. I was not convinced. Every workplace develops ghost stories eventually. Bus depots are no exception. Still, I found myself paying closer attention. The next time the man appeared, I studied him carefully through the mirror. He looked completely ordinary, middle-aged, short hair, work boots, dark jacket. The only thing unusual was his expression. He looked sad, not angry, not frightening, just deeply sad. The expression never changed. Weeks passed and things became stranger. One night I noticed the man was not alone anymore. A woman sat beside him. I had never seen her before. She looked nervous and exhausted. Neither passenger moved for the entire ride. When I reached the final stop and walked toward them, both vanished. Over the following weeks, more passengers began appearing. 3 one night, 4 the next, then 6. They always appeared without boarding and disappeared before I could reach them. By Christmas, nearly half the back of the bus would sometimes be occupied, but nobody ever spoke and none acknowledged me. They simply sat there. What bothered me most was the look on their faces. Every single one appeared exhausted, defeated, and anxious. They looked like people waiting for bad news they already knew was coming. Then came January 17th. A heavy fog had settled over the city after sunset. By midnight, visibility had dropped so low that even streetlights looked distant and blurry. I was halfway through the route when I checked the mirror and nearly hit the brakes. Every seat in the rear half of the bus was occupied. At least 20 passengers sat silently behind me. The atmosphere inside the bus felt different. The normal rattles and vibrations seemed muted. Everything felt unnaturally quiet. A few blocks later, the stop request bell rang. The sound nearly made me jump out of my seat. For months, these passengers had never interacted with anything. They never moved. They never spoke. Yet someone had requested a stop. Stop requested. I pulled over automatically and opened the doors. Nobody got off. The passengers remained perfectly still. Then the bell rang again, and again, and again. The sound echoed through the bus relentlessly. When I looked into the mirror, every passenger was staring directly at me. For the first time, they were not looking forward. They were looking at me. One passenger slowly raised an arm and pointed toward the windshield. I turned my attention back to the road. A city bus sat directly ahead in the middle of the intersection. Its lights were off. Its engine appeared dead. The vehicle blocked the entire road. I slammed on the brakes. The bus stopped less than 10 feet away. Through the fog, I could tell something was wrong. The paint scheme looked outdated, old, like something from decades ago. Then I saw the route number, 47. My stomach dropped. It was the old Route 47, the same route involved in the fatal crash 20 years earlier. The vehicle sat motionless in the fog. Every window was dark. Every seat appeared occupied. Standing beside it was a man wearing a transit uniform. As the fog shifted, I recognized him immediately. Carl, the driver who had died in the crash. I recognized him from an employee photograph hanging in the depot. He was not looking at his own bus. He was looking directly at mine. Then he slowly shook his head, just once. Immediately, the stop request bell began ringing non-stop. When I looked into the mirror, every passenger had stood up. Every one of them pointed toward a side street branching off from the intersection. Without thinking, I turned the wheel. The bus lurched down the side road. Seconds later, a tractor-trailer exploded through the intersection at full speed. The driver never touched the brakes. The truck tore through the exact spot where my bus would have been. Had I continued straight, the collision would have been catastrophic. The truck disappeared into the fog. I sat frozen behind the wheel, struggling to breathe. When I finally looked back toward the intersection, the old bus was gone. Carl was gone. The road was completely empty. I checked the mirror. Every passenger had disappeared. The bus was empty. The next morning, police reports confirmed that a truck driver had suffered a medical emergency and lost control of his vehicle near the industrial district around the exact time of the incident. Investigators later stated that anything entering that intersection would almost certainly have been struck. I never told management what happened, but something changed after that night. The passengers still appear occasionally, not often and never in large numbers anymore. Usually it is only one or two. The man in the back seat still shows up every few months. He always wears the same jacket and work boots. He always sits in the same seat. But now, whenever I catch sight of him in the mirror, he is not staring sadly into the distance. He is smiling. And every time I reach the final stop and turn around to look, he is gone. That one sits differently. Not every ghost story is a threat. Sometimes they stay because they are not finished yet. Let us keep going though, because this next one is unlike anything we have done tonight. A man works the box office at a historic movie theatre. Once a year, the same customer comes in, and there is one thing the entire staff is told. Under no circumstances, say the name of the movie he asks for. Story 4. A man shows up every year and asks for a movie that does not exist. I've been working at a historic movie theatre for almost 5 years now, and as far as I can tell, this guy's been coming since we opened. He is in one of the photos from before the renovation, and my boss says it has been a thing since before he started 35 years ago. Regardless, our box office is outside, so whoever is working that evening is the unlucky one who has to give him the bad news. I remember my first time very clearly. One of the managers took me aside. By this point, I had been told about this person, but I did not really believe any of it until Eliza, my manager, got super serious about it. Normally, she is a careless type who just wants to go home as quickly as possible. The lack of irony in her face scared me, probably saved my life. Okay, whatever you do, Do not say the name of the movie he asks for. I looked at her. Why? What happens? Do not think about that right now, because it is not going to happen, right? Right. All you say is, "Sorry, sir, we are not showing it, and we will never be showing it as far as I know." If he persists, just say you have the whole schedule right in front of you. Do not mess around with this. You feel me? Yeah, I got you. The time came. I watched the man dressed straight out of the 50s casually stroll up. He had a suit and hat, and he lit a cigarette and smoked it before approaching me. Besides this, he just seemed like a regular guy. "You're showing tonight?" he asked, naming his film. "No, I am sorry, sir, we are not showing that." "Anytime soon?" "Nope." "You sure about that, boy? I got the whole schedule here and it is not there, sir." "Seems thorough enough. Say, what are you all showing tonight?" "Oh, we are showing Killer Clowns from Outer Space. We show it every year around this time." "Killer Clowns?" he began laughing. "Why, that is a doozy. Thank you for your time nonetheless, friend." "My pleasure," I said. He walked away. I was eventually promoted to manager and became the one giving the pep talk before his appearance. I still did not know why this was happening or why we could not say the name of the movie, but I did not really want to find out. My 4th year here, I gave the talk to the girl working the box office that night, Sarah. She seemed sufficiently scared. I watched from inside as he approached. After a moment, Sarah opened the door to the box and quickly walked toward me. "He asked to see Killer Clowns," she said. My heart sank. "Sell him a ticket." "Can I just say we are not showing that either?" "No, he knows it is annual." "Okay, regular customer?" "Regular customer." I looked at my 2 co-workers at the concessions booth. "Just treat him like a regular customer, guys, okay?" They both nodded nervously. Sarah went back to the box, and next thing I knew, the man walked through the door with a smile. "Hello," I said. "Hello, good to see you again." I handed him a raffle ticket. "What is this for?" "Oh, we have a giveaway before every movie." "Oh, like a raffle?" "Yeah, well, thank you." He walked into the theater. No one among the customers seemed concerned by his presence besides the employees. "I'll watch him after I start the movie," I said after he had left the lobby. But as I turned to face forward, I realized I could no longer see color. I became aware of the tight usher's uniform that then wrapped my body along with my co-workers, whom I was selfishly grateful of for being just as confused as I was. We all wordlessly agreed to play along, but I became more nervous as I realized all of the customers were dressed in the same way as the recurring man. All of them were men, neatly dressed, and seemed to openly detest the brief time they had to interact with me when handing them their raffle tickets. I thought, this is bad. I went into the theatre to do my normal routine, not realizing that the whole event had completely changed inside as well. The renovation had tried to keep things as they were during this time, and they did a remarkable job from what I could tell in black and white. Every patron was wearing the same hat, which they all took off in unison as the countdown started. I rushed to the projection booth, hoping in vain that everything was the same there. I opened the door to a wave of cigarette smoke that burned my eyes. "What the hell are you doing up here, boy?" He took great big strides toward me past the many film reels and through the fog of smoke. In one quick motion, he recoiled his hand and brought it square onto my cheek. The smack echoed through the auditorium, and I was dazed for some time. When I came to, I was sitting on the steps, catching my breath as the movie began in front of me. It was not Killer Clowns. Instead, it was the image of a man screaming as his head began to melt like wax and pour down his chest. I was horrified but transfixed. It cut to a child standing alone in a field. A group of men, all dressed like the patrons in the theatre, came into frame and began eating the child's limbs piece by piece. They were not ravenous about it. They ate with the formality of a steak dinner, and the child laughed, even as they lay against the log with their head the only remaining appendage. They laughed until they were no longer a child. Then they began to wail endlessly. It was then I realized all of the men in the theatre were watching me with blank faces. I slid down the railing and rushed for the exit doors. "Why? Why have you done this?" the man on the screen screamed as I felt a hand grab my shoulder and what I assumed to be a knife enter my back. Almost instantaneously, I lost feeling in my legs, and my screams matched the now-grown child's. I crawled toward the door little by little, each movement sending searing pain throughout my body. Eliza opened the door. "Holy shit," she said, grabbing both my hands and pulling me through. I lay there, on the period-accurate carpet, in excruciating pain, bleeding as my co-workers quickly locked all of the doors into the auditorium. "Forget fire safety," Eliza said. Eventually we saw color again. Eliza called the ambulance. We did not see anyone leave the theater. The next day, my boss opened the doors to find an empty theater. Prognosis is I will never walk again. I told the police he would be back next year, but they did not believe me. We stopped playing Killer Clowns on that day, but he never asked for it again anyway. I am learning to move around better on my own with the wheelchair. I am going to figure him out. There is a corn festival every year here. It is circus themed. That is why we showed Killer Clowns on the specific date. But I happen to know that said circus has been happening since 1922. The fair is the only other common denominator besides the man himself. He is still out there, and whoever works that box office next year does not know yet. Last story tonight, and this one is the longest. A homeless man who has been living on the streets for 7 years gets invited to a free meal. Something is deeply wrong with the place from the moment he walks in. He almost does not walk back out.